Okay, good morning. Sorry, we're going to do this one more time to you guys. We're going to spend just a few more minutes, wrap up Tevilas Keilim, and then we will move. Okay, just the very end of yesterday got cut off. That disposables. So, what happens if you buy a glass dish? Again, we're not talking about packaging where the dish is batal to the food. We discussed that already. We're talking about you buy a dish for the dish's sake, and it's called a disposable. It's meant to be thrown away. You use it once, twice, three times, and you throw it out. But let's say it's glass or some kind of other material where it could last forever. It's not going to fall apart. It's not thick or thin aluminum foil. So what's the halacha? So Igros Moshe says, since the intention from everybody's point of view is to throw it out, he says it's a suffix. And I think, so Lamaisa, it's basically, it's going to be a machlokas. Some will say, I think the most common would be to tovel it without a bracha. But again, depending if it's glass, depending on who you ask, some will say you don't have to tovel it, depending what it is. Okay, that was just disposables. Now, I just want to give a quick shout out to Rav Moshe Yasker for helping me understand the sugya of peelers, which we discussed yesterday. Now, Rav Mordechai Morty Ness pointed out, long handles, I don't think we discussed. We mentioned that the entire kli, 100% on all sides, needs to be immersed completely all at once, not half and half, in order for it to be considered a proper dipping. Otherwise, it needs to be re-dipped, the pashtus, with a bracha. Because if it's not all done all at once, it wasn't actually done. Lahalacha. And it doesn't matter how long the handles are, the entire amount must completely be dipped. Even if it's plastic, it doesn't matter. It's all part of the kli. And if part of it's not dipped, so then so that part's not dipped. And even if that part's only plastic, it still is me'akev the rest of the kli, at least where it's attached. Either because the whole part needs to be dipped, or it becomes like a chatzitza for the part of the metal where it's attached to. Whatever it is, it all needs to be dipped. We will see in Reish Bet coming up, that there is an exception to the rule, but basically never applies to our dishes. We'll see when we get there. Okay. Now, one last thing to point out. A shout out to Rav Avraham Kesslinger, who sent me an article, and based on that, I just want to re-discuss one last quick topic, the topic of Corel and Corningware or glass. We need to know what they are. Just for fun, I asked on the computer, AI, what's the halacha on Corel and Corningware? So he paskins that Corel needs to be dipped with a bracha, and Corningware needs to be dipped without a bracha. So, is AI correct? Let's see. But anyways, because of his article, I realized, whether I understand it or not, there are some Rabbanim who will say Corningware and Corel are both pater lagamre, an extreme minority, and or some will say they need to be dipped without a bracha, and some will be machalik between Corel and Corningware. This happens to be, I did a little bit of searching on the internet, and what I found is there are, in particular, some of the hashkacha agencies online, but just whatever, depends what you read. It's not uncommon for some of them to list that Corel should be dipped with a bracha, and Corningware should be dipped without a bracha, which is hence why AI said what it said. If you do a random search online, it's very common to hear the distinction, and that they're both in need, but one with and one without a bracha. So let me just point out, I saw in Psakim Mechuvas that any time you have a material, right, whether it's metal, whether it's glass, and it's a mixture of different materials, so in it he quotes Shevet Levi, Minchas Yitzchak, who says you go after the majority of the material. The material is defined by the majority. Right? Holchin achar harov. That's what we're all used to. I'm not familiar with anyone in particular who argues with this, but like if you were to mix, let's say we say ceramic with glass or with plastic with metal, just whatever example you want to come up with, the pashtus you should go after rov. Okay, so keep that in mind. And as far as I know, everybody agrees glass is chayev in Tevila with the bracha. There's no one who argues. But what about colored glass? Why should colored glass be different? Stained glass. Stained glass, just you throw in a few elements. Lead, you can have a little lead in there, little salts, compounds, whatever is in there, and it can change the color. As far as I'm aware, everyone agrees. If we call it glass, looks like glass, smells like glass, just because it's got a little color in there, doesn't change it from being glass. That's what, as far as I know, I haven't seen anyone say otherwise. And then any of the websites.
The road is always glass, no?
So let me explain. What is glass? What is glass? So the general glass that we talk about, again, I don't know the exact composition in the time of Chazal 2,000 years ago. Mistama was very similar to what it is today. And basically all glass is 70%, 70 something, about 70% sand, or more scientifically, silica. Basically all glass that we have, and most of the glass that we have that we're familiar with, that we see, almost all glass is soda lime glass. In other words, it's made up of 70%, or around 70% sand or silica, and then the rest of it is made up of soda ash. Chemically, it's sodium carbonate, and soda ash is like ash that comes from plants. But in limestone, again, it's a stone powder, or when it gets mixed in, and that's calcium carbonate. So those other two items are not sand. It's only 70% sand, and that's what everyone calls glass, and that's what everyone, that's what looks like glass, feels like glass, tastes like glass, and that's what everyone says tovos with a bracha. What's tempered glass? Tempered glass is the same soda lime glass that we just mentioned. However, it's melted, it's heated up, right, on a high temperature, and then it's rapidly cooled down very quickly. When they make it like that, right, they melt it, they form it into their whatever form they want to melt it into, and then when they cool it down, they rapidly cool it down, and that makes it tempered. So it's the same material. It's called tempered glass, and we know it's more resistant to more resistant, or when it breaks, it'll break into little pieces and not large, sharp pieces as much. So it's safer. Okay. So let's no, or whatever it is, but that's tempered glass. Now, so many of us are familiar with the names Duralex, Pyrex, Corel, and Corningware. So those are all types of glass, and they're all name brands or lines from the company, named after the company, or the line, the product line of that particular company. They're all trademarked, they're registered, whatever, and nobody knows exactly to the T what they are, the exact composition, exactly how it's made. But basically we know, but not exactly, because otherwise that's how they keep it for themselves. And so Duralex, that is tempered glass. That's all it is, tempered glass. So as far as I know, everyone says, and it's pretty clear, looks like glass. Everyone says, as far as I know, you dip it with a bracha, and why not? It's tempered glass. It's the same glass as everything. Okay, what about Pyrex? So two types of Pyrex. Pyrex typically was made up of the same 70%, again, it's all rough, 70% silica, and then that 30% has a lot of boron trioxide mixed in, right? Another compound, another material, but it's still majority glass, and it looks similar to glass, and often nowadays or the later types are made of Pyrex are actually the same soda lime tempered glass. And so I think everyone says to say it with a bracha. Okay. Korel. What's korel? It's basically a 3-ply layer. At least that's how they explain it. It might be one with some kind of a melted glaze. I don't know exactly, but it's basically, they say it is exactly this. They say it's a tempered glass. And um, it certainly sounds like glass and feels like glass, and it pretty much looks like glass, but it has a very opaque white to it, and therefore, since we're used to glossy or glazed ceramics, it could look a little bit like ceramic material, but I think it mostly looks like glass, and but it is a glass. It's a tempered glass. That's really what it is.
They make black Corel also, no?
What?
They make black Corel also.
As far as I know, all Corel is white. The inside layer is white. It's clear on the outside, um, but they imprint on it. Um, what's it called? They imprint on it their colors and designs, and right on top of it. Okay, Corningware is also 70% sand or silica, but 20% is a ceramic material, dialuminum oxide. And therefore, it's often referred to as a hybrid between glass and ceramic. But it's the same 70% silica as sand, and it's the same melted. Every product we just mentioned, you can crush it, melt it down, and reform it, just like glass, because I think it is glass. And so I don't understand why, I personally don't understand the reasoning why, I haven't seen it anywhere explained, why one would not say a tzchayev with a bracha. The only thing I could understand is, again, they all have basically the same properties. Corningware actually looks the most, because we're used to glazed ceramics, Corningware looks the most like possibly glazed ceramic than all the other products we just mentioned. But physically, the material-wise, it's for sure glass. And if you look at it on the shelf, you look at it from a foot away, it might look more like ceramic than glass. So I guess that could, I believe that we can argue about it. That's tam v'reach, but I do believe when you look at it, it definitely resembles glazed ceramics. I think that's objective, but again, maybe that's subjective. Anyway, so
You really don't see a difference how the mindset.
So as far as the halacha, it could be. I'll just say in this chus of if you want to say it doesn't need to be toveld, or it's by a bracha or without a bracha, it's probably because they say you don't go by the material, you go by what it looks like to the naked eye from standing a foot away, and then it might not look like glass. I mean, it's still meltable. It still has that hard, brittle sound to it. But anyways, it does have 20% ceramic in there. Again, usually we go after rove, but maybe for this Gzeira Derabanan, they feel like you go after what it looks like, or it's a suffix, and fine. So we'll leave it like that. It's a little bit of a machlokas, but fine. Let's jump to. Well, that took longer. Let's go to Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph. Okay, now this Siman is primarily a review of what we already learned from Hilchos Pesach. But okay, let's learn it, and we won't learn it as in depth as we did with Tevilas Keilim. Sorry if I slowed you down. Okay, Chuf Chaf Aleph Seif Aleph. Halokeach Keilim Yishanim Min Hagoy. You're going to go buy used dishes from a non-Jew. All right, so now we're moving away from Tevilas Keilim. Keep that in mind. We're moving forward. Now we're discussing, again, the halachas of blia, of actual isser mixed into your pot, and now when you use it, you don't want it to get into your food. So alokeach kelim mishanim min hagoy kederech shenishtamesh behen hagoy kach hu hechsheran. However, it was used by the goy. That's how, or however it was used for treif food. Then that's how it needs to be kosher. Again, the issue here is isser that gets absorbed into the pot. Lefichach. Okay, let's explain. Halokech kli tashmish ishanim shemishtamshim behem betzonin. If you buy a kli that was used by the goy, but this kli we know is always used for cold. You know, you have certain dishes, you know the minhag is clearly always to use it for cold. You have dishes that will get broken if you used it with heat, so you know it was used for cold. Kagon, such as kosot, utzlochiot, cups and plates, uchayot sebahen, and anything like them. Right? We discussed this before about klisheni, so it could even be plates. So anything like it, what do? Madichan, all you have to do, if you know it's always used for cold, then it depends. Let's say for sure we're talking about, at least we're for sure talking about plates that were never used for hot. So all you need to do is you rinse them off. V'tzarich l'shafshafan heitev, l'mayim bishat hadacha, and you have to wash it really well and scrub it.
Tzlochiot is not salachot.
Oh, tzlochiot are...
Tzlochiot are water
pitchers? Water pitchers. Okay, fine. Very good. We'll stick with cups and water pitchers that you know are not used with hot, even as a klisheni. Okay, that you might need to do is Yoreh, kedei klipa. Very good. Kedei lahasir ulomare ka'isr sha'al gabehen v'achar kach shotfan b'mayim. So what do? You need to, we said, scrub them to remove any food or thing that's soup or material that gets stuck onto them. And then you have to rinse it in water, make sure you scrub it all off, and remove any of the remnants. Umat bilan vehem mutarin. And then you have to do Tevilas Keilim, of course, if it's a material that needs it. And then it's mutter to go ahead and use it. Even if it's used from a goy, it's okay. Haga. What is this going on? Okay, let's go on. Yesh mekomot shenagu heter l'sum yayin b'keilim sheneserem medubakim b'chelev. Now, there are some places that lachatchila, the minhag is, they're allowed to take wooden barrels or wooden keilim, and even though you know that it's lined with some actual lard or chelev, fat, it's aser. To seal it from dripping out, to plug in any of the holes. For wine, it's mutter. Why? They didn't say it's mutter for other liquids, but for wine it is. Why? Mishum sheteva hayayin livroach min hakli. Because the nature of wine, min hachelev, livroach min hachelev, because wine, it, what's the right word for it? It not pushes away. It repels itself from the chelev. It doesn't allow it to mix in. The chelev nikrash ve'omed be'atzmo. As we're talking about, not liquid fat, we're talking about it's hardened, it's congealed, or it's like a wax material. And therefore it stays there. Ve'eno nogea klal b'yayin. And so be'etzem, it doesn't touch or doesn't mix in at all, and everything is cold, and they do it lechatchila. Okay. Bet. Lakach mehem keilim shnishtamesh behem bechamin. Now, most dishes or pots, it's used with hot. All right? So what do? Bein shehem shel matechet, o shel eitz, o shel even. It doesn't matter if it's metal, wood, or stone. Again, we're talking about blia, we're not talking about hochas tuma v'tara, and no matter what, they must be immersed in boiling hot water, hagalas kelim, in order to pull out and extract any of the isser that was in there. V'achar kach matbilan, and then after you make it kosher, then that's the proper time to do tevilas kelim. Right? You don't do tevilas kelim before you kosher it. First you kosher it, and then you do tevila. If it's from a material that needs to be tovelt. Vehemutarim, and then it's mutter lechatchila to use these dishes because you koshered it and you toveled it, and there's no reason to be machmer. V'im hit bilan v'acharkach higilan mutarim. And if b'di'evid you switch the order, now it's mutter lechatchila. In other words, it's mutter, or however you want to read it, b'di'evid, now it's mutter, and there's no reason to tovel it again. That's the first opinion. In other words, it doesn't really matter because they're two separate issues. As long as there is no chatzitza when you did the tevila, then it works. It's just because there's a blia inside the walls that doesn't prevent tevilas kelim. V'yesh omrim, and then there is a yesh omrim. It seems to be only midarabanan. Shach and Taz says that because it's near it looks like, well, actually it's in the Taz. Ketovel v'sheretz biyado. Because it looks, since you need to now clean it, it looks like by Tumantara, or it has that same concept of tovel v'sheretz biyado. And so therefore you need to do it in that order. And the Shach says, lechatchila, we should paskin like the yesh omrim. Okay. Stam of the Shulchan Aruch is to paskin like the stam, which you don't even have to be machmer.
It's only a mirror. It's not that it's really totally say.
Right. In other words, midirabanan. That's what I said. That's what it sounds like. Correct. So b'diavad, everyone agrees it works. Question is, how much effort do you need to put into it? Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. Haga. Okay. Din kli etzem. Ayen b'hilchas Pesach, siman tufnot aleph. Like we said, look in Hilchas Pesach. We're just going to scratch the surface of these halachos because we already did be'iyun in Orach Chaim. Ein lahagil shum kli kol zman shehu ben yomo. And the Rama reminds us, you're not supposed to do hagalas Keilim if it's a ben yomo. The proper thing to do is always wait for it not to be a ben yomo. The post can point out, what's the problem? It's because you want to make sure when you tovel it that if the ta'am is still an isser ta'am, if it's still a fresh ta'am, as a ta'am lishvach, that's going to go in the water that you're boiling into it, and then it's going to go right back into your pot. So it doesn't help to do hagalas kelim if it's a ben yomo. Either it needs to be a ta'am lifgam, or the pot needs to be shishim of water keneged the pot, and it's often not. Again, it depends on the situation, how big your utensils are, how big your pot is. And to avoid it, it's important just to avoid any problems. That's just what we do. We wait until it's not a ben yomo. At least lachatchila. But okay, so then it needs to be tal nifgam or shishim kenegdo, or another eitzah, if you need to do it and it's a ben yomo, is you add some soap and make the water putrid flavor, and then therefore it becomes tal nifgam. But that's all back to ayin, what we learned in Hilchas Pesach. So, missing out on purpose. You read Gimel, he left things out. I believe he would agree to this. The ins and outs, what works for the Eved, what's lachatchila, I say, let's refer to Orach Chaim. But, okay. Ve'ein lishtamish b'mei hagala, kol makom shetzarich hagala, okay. And then we don't use this hagala water, lachatchila, because it has blia in there of iser. Kol makom shetzarich hagala lamahani in kalfo l'kli, b'kli umanut. Okay. Let's say you have a piece of, let's say you're able to peel off the outside layer. In general, we say it doesn't help. In other words, let's say you have a pot. You have some kind of a wooden kli, for example. That's where it's more common. You can, if it's, you have kli rishon, hot is boleya inside. Sometimes things become the Isser goes all the way through. We say it goes through all the walls. So it doesn't. It depends. Again, in the previous sugya, sometimes it's only kedei klipa, kedei natila, but in general, it goes beyond the klipa, and so it doesn't help just to sand or plane the outside of the wood because it goes all the way through, and so therefore it doesn't help. You have to do however you have to kosher it. That's how you kosher it. It's like hagala, libun, whatever the item is. That's what we need to do. Just the outside surface doesn't help. Um, I just want to point out, even a kli basar, even a kli basar, it needs to be also lechadchila not a ben yomo, but b'diavad it's fine because it's not bernat a terabala. Just going to read Gimel and we'll stop. Dini hagala v'libun halohim ketuvim behilchos Pesach. And so the Mechaber himself says all these halachos we learned in Hilchos Pesach. So he is extremely bekitzer over here, and we're going to follow his custom. Okay, we'll stop.